All Suzuki Book 1 pieces explained. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Megan. I'm a violinist and teacher. I've been playing the violin for over 25 years now, which is so crazy. I have my bachelor's and master's degrees in violin performance, and I am Suzuki trained. If you're enjoying my videos, please just take a quick second to make sure you're subscribed to my channel. And if you're looking for more structure and support along your violin journey, check out the links in the description for my online membership, Learn Violin Online, as well as a private lesson application. I love the Suzuki method, and I truly believe it is one of the best ways to learn how to play the violin. However, I think one of the major cons or drawbacks of the method is that it can be very hard to learn without a Suzuki trained teacher. The Suzuki method, especially the first 4 books, are so intentional with the way that the pieces are laid out. You are either learning a new skill or working on one that you just learned, and everything builds upon each other. However, these skills are not always obvious, even to the trained eye. I started my Suzuki training in the first year of my master's, and these skills were not obvious to me. And I was already a master's student, I was already playing at a very high level. But unless you know what you're looking for, unless you've been trained on the method and how to teach it, it can be very hard to see how this method is effective. So in this video, I'm going to explain the skills that you're learning in each piece in Suzuki Book 1, and I'm also going to link all of my Suzuki courses in the description. I have individual courses for books 1 through 8 where I teach you how to play every piece in the book, plus give you practice along videos and instructions on the important skills that you're learning. And I also have a Suzuki Books 1 through 8 mega bundle that will take you from beginner to advanced student step by step. I often say that book 1 is the hardest book, not because the pieces themselves are necessarily the hardest, but because you have to overcome the biggest learning curve. In book 1, everything is new and unfamiliar. And on top of learning the instrument itself, you're also learning how to practice, which is a totally separate skill. So the Suzuki method begins with the Twinkle Variations. And there's a lot of important skills that go into this simple piece. So first we have overall posture. We want to make sure that we are holding the bow correctly, that we're holding the violin correctly, that we're placing our left hand fingers down correctly. We're also practicing bow mechanics, i.e. we need to be bowing with our elbow, not our shoulder. We're also working on finger placement, the intonation of fingers 1, 2, and 3 on the A string and the E string. We're working on string crossings. And sound. We don't want to have a super scratchy sound. We don't want to have a super wispy sound. We want to make sure our bow is staying right in the middle, halfway between the bridge and the fingerboard, and that we have a clear, pleasing tone. So Twinkle Variations seem super simple, but there's actually so much that go into them. Lightly Row is more work on string crossings. In Twinkle, we only had to cross from open string to open string or from open E to D, third finger on the A string. But in Lightly Row, we have to cross from open E to C sharp and back again, which is a new skill. The note values are also a bit longer, so we want to be using a little bit more bow, keeping our bow straight, making sure our intonation is accurate, and that we have a pleasing sound. Song of the Wind, we introduce the staccato bow stroke, and a lot of times beginners overcomplicate this. Staccato is simply stopping the bow between each note. We want to hear a little space in between each note. We are also learning about the retake, and we're learning how to keep our fingers down, namely how to keep our finger down on one string and place another finger down on another string. Next up, we have Go Tell Aunt Rhody, which is more work for string crossings and smooth bowing. So for Twinkle and the Twinkle Variations, we started out in the middle of the bow with just a little bit of bow. We increased that bow usage in Lightly Row. And by the time we get to Go Tell Aunt Rhody, we should be using full bows. Full smooth bows. String crossing is another big one in this piece because we have a very quick string crossing from open E to D, third finger on the A string. Oh Come Little Children is all about the bowing as well. This is the first piece that starts on an up bow, And on the last measure of each of the first 3 lines, we have a double up bow. So students need to use half their bow on each note. So being able to go the same bow direction without a retake is a new skill. Bow division and bow management are also important. Like I said, we want to start at the middle of the bow, and on those double up bow measures, use half our bow on each note. There's also a ton of string crossings in this piece, so it's really important that those are clean. Rhythm is also sometimes a little bit tricky in O Come Little Children, especially with all the repetitive notes. You need to make sure that they're not all just sounding like quarter notes. In May Song, we have a new rhythm, a dotted quarter followed by an 8th note. I like to do rhythm exercises with my students where I will play a rhythm on open strings and have them repeat. It's a lot of fun. Particularly in the 3rd measure where you have to go from A string to E string, then back to A string very quickly. Quickest string crossing we've had so far. We're also working more on anchor fingers. That was brought up in Song of the Wind, but here we are keeping our finger down on one string while another finger stays on that same string. Long, long ago, this is the first time that we play on the D string. We have one D string note, which is first finger on the D string. And we are also retaking the bow, but landing on a different string. So we have a retake that starts on open A, but land on the E string instead of the A string. This is also where alternating bowing is introduced, which is a skill that will be further refined in book 2. But essentially, you're going to use your entire bow on the quarter notes and the half notes, and then alternate the 8th notes between the frog and the tip. In Allegro, we are mostly working on the quarter note staccato notes. Because they are quarter notes, because they are longer notes, we need to use more bow on them than we did in Song of the Wind. And when we use more bow, generally the harder it is to control. We're also working on speed. Allegro means fast, and I by no means think you have to be able to play all of these pieces at the speed that they were meant to go or that you hear other people play them. But the piece has a totally different feel if you play it, like this. Versus totally different vibe. We also have our first ritardando, which is a slow down at the end of the 3rd line, and a fermata. Next up, we have Perpetual Motion, which is the first time that we are using our 4th finger. In addition to just practicing the 4th finger and getting, it strong and comfortable, we also want to be able to hear the difference between an open string and a 4th finger because they do have a very different sound. This piece also has staccato notes and non-staccato notes. So the first time around when you're playing the 8th notes, all of the notes are staccato, and then in the variation, they are détaché, they are smooth. I find this piece can also be tricky for the memory. It's really easy to get lost because it is kind of repetitive. Allegretto, we change keys. We go to the key of D major, and these next 2 pieces, Allegretto and Andantino, are mostly played on the D string. Allegretto is also the very first time we play on the G string, yay, with our 1st finger. We're continuing to work on 4th fingers in this piece as well, and making a distinction between the bowing in Allegretto and Andantino is very important. The 2 pieces are very similar. However, in Allegretto, all of the notes are staccato. And then in Andantino, it's only the quarter notes that are staccato. So making that distinction is important. Andantino, again, is just more practice with the D string. The big thing with Andantino is the unprepared 4th finger. In measure 11, I highly recommend using the 4 on the 1st note so that you can practice finding that 4 out of nowhere and placing it down by itself. Etude, which I really don't like, but that's neither here nor there, is the first piece where we play on all 4 strings, yay. Etude is very similar to Perpetual Motion in that we have the staccato single notes and then the détaché doubles. So we're working on string crossings between all 4 strings, and it's also the first piece in the key of G major. So we're learning the G major scale, we're learning about the G major finger pattern, the low 2nd finger, and we're learning to change the placement of our 2nd finger depending on what string we're on. Minuet 1 is our first instance of a slur. So a slur indicates to play the notes underneath it in the same bow direction. And actually in Minuet 1, the slurs that we have are technically up bow staccato. So yes, starting them early, starting up bow staccato from book 1. So we want our notes to be going in the same bow direction, but there's gonna be a little space in between them. This piece is also the first that has a key change. Now it's not technically notated, but measures 9 through 16 change to the key of D major. So that means we have an accidental here of C sharp. So again, we're working on our different finger placements, changing that second finger placement. And this is also the first piece that I like to incorporate dynamics in. I feel like the previous pieces, there's already so much going on and we're working on posture and intonation and on all that stuff. But here's where you can add a little bit of dynamics, and the way that I suggest doing them in book 1 is just by changing the amount of bow you're using. So for the piano section here, just use maybe half or like even a third of the bow to make it sound softer. Minuet 2 is more string crossing practice. This time we're quickly crossing over 3 strings instead of just 2. It's also the very first instance of a triplet, which is a new rhythmic pattern, and a smooth slur, and a 3-note slur. There's also a new finger placement introduced in this piece, which is the high 3rd finger. Additionally, we have a slur, 2-note slur that crosses from a higher string to a lower string. In the previous piece, the Minuet 1, the slurs were all on the same string, and the triplet slurs in this piece are on the same string as well. So crossing strings while you're slurring is another skill learned in this piece. And you have to go from the E string over to the D string without a slur. So you have to play this. So essentially string crossing over one string, or hopping over one string, or skipping one string. Minuet 3 is all about the slurs. There are tons of slurs in this piece, both on the same string and crossing a string. We also have our very first grace note, which is actually trill preparation. This is the very first time we play 4th finger on the E string. And again, we have a key change to the key of D major starting in bar 17. Happy Farmer is all about the bowing. The bowing in the very first measure trips a lot of students up. It's very important that you divide your bow correctly. You want to use about 3/4 of the bow on the dotted quarter and only about 1/4 of the bow on the 1/8. Bow planning and bow division is really, really important in Happy Farmer. There's a really specific way that you need to do it. That could be a whole different video in itself. And finally, the gavotte. The gavotte is hard, and to be perfectly honest, sometimes I just skip it. It kind of just depends on the student. We have our very first ever 4-note slur. We have 16th notes as well. And we also have to change our finger placement really quickly. So in this slur, we play C sharp, but then in this slur, we play C natural. We also have our very first pizzicato at the end, and more practice with string crossings in slurs and also skipping a string. So like going from G string to A string. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the skills that we are learning in each piece. Obviously, there's way more to cover, and I can go much more in depth on these, and I do so in my Suzuki courses. So if you like this video, definitely check those out. Thank you so much for watching, and please make sure you subscribe before you go.